so it's good enough for me. Well, I'm just going to give a quick history. I met my stepmother, I was 7. The first night I met her, she was invited from Norway, and we sat on the floor and drew out a Michelangelo book for about 3 hours, and she turned out to be a best friend. And my grandmother was a China painter. In high school, I grew up in East Los Angeles, and it was the 60s, so had East Los Angeles in the 60s, and it was pretty messy. I had an art teacher that took me under her wing, and when I would come to class obliterated, she would go to the counselors and say, I have a project I want Lance to work on all day. And I graduated in 71, and in 2006 she came to a show I had in LA with a pencil drawing that I had done in 10th grade that she framed. And she said, I've been following you all along. So mentors have been a huge part of my life. I think Brett's been a huge part of a lot of artists last year. You know, he's pretty, very devoted mentor, and I've watched that and appreciated it. I quit painting. Actually, I lived in a religious cult for quite a while, and when I got out, my college painting teacher warned me in advance. He said, being an artist is like this, so learn something else that you can do. So I learned to do signs, and I had a booming sign shop the whole time I lived in LA. And I always advise people, find something that you love that you can do on the side, or something that you're good at. So I started painting again in 1984, and I copied a big painting of some Kurds out of a National Geographic and entered it in a show, and I won Best of Show. And a friend of mine bought the painting, and he had a friend with a gallery in Paris, and she, said, oh, this is beautiful. And I said, oh, I'd love to show in your gallery. And she said, what? And she said, in 10 years, maybe I would talk to you, but you need a vocabulary, you need your own voice. This is just a copy of a picture. It's very skillful. So I just thought it was so hot, and she put me right in my place, and it was the best thing that ever happened. So fast forward, in the 80s, I saw a PBS special with Fritz Scholder, and when I saw his work, I thought, this is like seeing Hendrix at Monterey. I had never seen anything like it, and it just resonated with me so vividly. Well, 2 years later, my mom died, and she lived in Phoenix, and after the funeral, we went to Trader Vic's for lunch. And I went outside to have a cigarette, and I walked down the sidewalk, and I looked in the gallery next door, and there was Fritz Scholder installing a show. And I just said, wow, you're Fritz Scholder. And he laughed, and he said, yes, I am. And we talked for about an hour, and we stayed in touch. This guy's in 150 museums around the world, and every show he would send me a personalized note on a postcard. He was just so gracious, and it's a big lesson that the bigger you get, the more gracious you should get. And I asked him if I could do workshops with him, and he said, I'll tell you what, send me some photos of your work and we'll see what we can do. And I sent him 6 photos, and I came home to a message on the answering machine, said, this is Fritz Scholder. And I said, yeah, I think we can work together. It'll be $1,000 a day, we'll work 12 hours a day. And so he said, bring those 6 paintings with you when you come out. And so I'm driving from Long Beach to Phoenix with those paintings, thinking, oh man, I'm gonna be all over Europe, I'll be in New York, this is gonna happen. And when I got there, he said, I'll go get some coffee, would you put those paintings up against the wall? And I put them up there, and he came out, and we're drinking our coffee, and he's just going, oh man, wow, these are dreadful. So that was my second humbling, where I just thought I was just, I was kind of an art hero around the South Bay, and I had a gallery and all that. And so I called my then wife, and she said, so what galleries are you gonna be in and all that? And I said, he said my work's dreadful. And she said, you wanna come home? I said, hell no, I'm paying this guy $1,000 a day to teach me to paint. And if I'm not good, then I wanna be, and it'll be worth it. So we stayed friends after that, and we stayed friends right until when he died. And he was a huge influence and just a great friend and mentor. And he's just always been a huge influence. I have so many influences, but he and another artist named Rick Bartow up in Oregon, a Native American painter. I seem to resonate with Native American painters the most. So, time to look at the notes. I'm 72, man. You know, it's like, I'm going to Stacy, you know, the round thing that tells time? Well, I can just talk about the paintings here. I think I'm gonna start with this one, because it's an older one. I showed in Taos. I showed in Taos, Santa Fe, Scottsdale, LA, Utah, Idaho. I showed all over the place. A friend of mine lived in the Pueblo down in Taos, and she invited me to go to the deer dance, and that's where they celebrate the animal that they killed that year. They wear the carcass of it, and there's drumming and chanting. So I was all into it, watching these guys, and it was just mesmerizing and just so primitive, just ancient energy. Then this Lord Monte Carlo was going down the road, and he's blowing Tupac out the speakers, just louder than the drumming. And two things struck me. One thing was how sad it is that the traditions are being swept aside, and they're just such beautiful traditions, and we need that spirituality. And I thought, man, you know, there's no respect for this going on or anything, and there's such a gang culture now. But the other thing was, I realized, well, give these guys some respect, because hip hop is kind of the indigenous music of the 21st century. So don't be so judgmental, because it's their thing. And also, hip hop and rap has really changed a lot. It started off very pro-violence, pro-gang, pro-macho, and so much of it now has flipped, and it's like, that's not where it's at, kids. Don't do that. So, the method that I use, the entire canvas is painted like this. And I sketch the figure in pretty loosely. And then I paint in the negative space around it to form the figure. And there's a little bit of shading and just a little tiny bit of this, but I kind of straddle the line between figurative and abstract. You can see it pretty well. In this one, you can see it really well. You ask Carol if she paints fast or slow. This was a very fast painting. Probably took 45 minutes at the most. And some painting, you paint like this, but this painting, it's with the shoulder. It's big, big movement. And a lot of times, and I do this in workshops too, I'll just do underpainting like this, step back, what do you see? You know, some people might see, well, you know, gosh, I see a dragon, I see fairies, I see a horse. I saw these two figures, and again, just loosely define them to leave it enough abstract so that it's very lyrical. This horse is the same thing. And I'm terrified of horses. I've been thrown off once and trampled once, and it's, yeah, I'm really afraid of them, but I'm mesmerized by them too, just the strength and the form and the grace that they have. So this is the same underpainting technique, but a lot of my paintings, I'll ask them, why did I paint you? What was this? And I dialogue with the paintings because I'm very Jungian in my philosophy and in my practice. So I'll ask the painting, how come I painted this? And it's like, well, you're fascinated with horses and you're gonna face your fear on the canvas. I would never get on a horse again in my life. But, so I just asked it, what is this here? And I do carry a big dialogue with my paintings. This is the same kind of thing. Got a lot going on in my life. My grandson has cancer. My girlfriend has had 6 hip surgeries and she has blood clots where she's borderline stroke and just a lot going on. But he's dancing in the fire, fire dancer. So you have to kind of get into a place also where you can still celebrate and still dance and all that and not let things get to you. Brett and I have kind of discussed that with his cancer, and I had a spinal injury where my legs were paralyzed for about a year. So I got back up though. I was gonna bring the painting, but Stacy said, no more paintings. I have one that's called Learning to Walk, and I had to learn just a step at a time how to walk. But one day I was dancing in the studio, and it was kind of like Steve Martin with his feet in the jerk wearing. And I was like, wow, I'm dancing, look at this. So this is Dance on Fire. This, you know, I have a friend, I'm trying not to take up too much time. I have a friend named Moses who's from Rwanda, and his story is crazy. He was 2 years old during the whole thing, and the Hutus came into his village, and his dad put him in a church in a girl's dress, thinking, okay, church, girl's dress, maybe they won't do anything. And they didn't, but they put him in a basket and put him in a river, and his dad found him 2 days later. But he and I are good friends, and I've been really influenced by the Africans' use of foliage and things. I think the first time we saw that was probably in Obama's portrait. So, you know, I don't want to copy anybody, but I'm just slightly starting to use some of these floral patterns. And the same thing kind of with birds here, where the background isn't just a background, but it's got, you know, just something to kind of fill in some of the negative space. Same thing with the flowers and this fun little bear here. And Cloud Dancers is the same technique, the underpainting technique, but again, it's dark back here, but they're moving into the light. So it's kind of the same message to myself that, like, okay, it's cloudy, it's dark, but you can dance. What has happened recently, you know, I don't know if any of you feel this way sometimes, but sometimes I'll think, I have this gift, but it just doesn't feel quite like I'm using it the way I should be using it. Valerie was so kind to me, and she just said, paint whatever you want to paint, which was really nice, because so many shows, it's like the theme is water, the theme is dancers, and you have to do this certain thing, but I was just able to do whatever I wanted. But just with the devastation of the environment, you know, we live where every single one of these animals, except for the wolf, but there's tons of coyotes. I just am thinking of all of these animals as diaspora of all the animals escaping the environmental holocaust. And the same thing here. There's just so much confusion and everything in these paintings, and it's a whole new theme for me, but I'm really, I've done some sculptures about it, and it feels like I'm really doing something now, where I'm doing something useful. You know, God's given me a gift, and I'm always going, all I painted was a girl. And so now it feels like I'm really moving into a direction that is what I'm supposed to be doing. But with Valerie letting me do what I want, the muse in kimono, again, I thought, well, why did I paint that? And it struck me, I've had 3 or 4 girlfriends that wear kimonos in the morning. So
Part of it is processing messy relationships, and part of it